Good afternoon, fourth grade. Today we are going to learn about Sobek or Salcus, the crocodile god. Let's begin with our quick write. It says, which is your favorite Egyptian god or goddess and why? Press pause to write down your answer in 2 sentences or 3 sentences and play when you're ready for the focus question and vocabulary. Our focus question is, what is Sobek's role among the Egyptian gods and goddesses? Like, what's his job? Does he have any special kind of powers? Do the other gods and goddesses look to him to do certain things? That's what we're going to find out today. Our vocabulary words are frugal. That is when you are, you're sparing with your money. You don't want to spend your money unless you absolutely have to. You like to save your money if you're frugal. The next one is moderation. That's when you don't do too much, you don't do too little, you do the right amount of whatever it is. So if you talking about how much junk food you eat, you eat junk food in moderation. You don't eat too much. You don't eat no junk food, you eat just a little bit. And the last one is indulge, when you allow yourself to just enjoy anything. If you indulge, you are not someone who does things in moderation. And if you're frugal, you're not someone who does things in moderation. If you're frugal, you do too little, and if you indulge, you do too much. But if you do it in moderation, you do it just right. Let's keep going. As we're reading our story about Sobek, we want to use our CSPS strategy. On the first page, we are going to learn who Sobek is. Actually, we won't learn about who he is until about the third page, okay? These first 2 pages are like an overview of some of the Egyptian gods and goddesses, okay? All right, when it came to eating, the gods and goddesses were frugal and actually a rather boring bunch. People sometimes made them elaborate food offerings, piles of dates, amorphous of wine, platters and platters of grilled vegetables, baked geese, stewed river fish, and vast arrays of sweets. But it was all folly. Deities preferred to eat simply. Bread and fresh water generally did the trick. Few liked vegetables, and those who participated in rituals and the underworld duat even hated onions. Some delighted in honey, while others found it bitter. The same was true for beer and wine. The goddess Hut-Haru was known to be liberal in regard, and she encouraged people to drink as they came to pray to her, to loosen their inhibitions so they could talk more freely and dance more joyously. The god Set had a reputation for getting drunk and bawdy just for the pleasure of it. The god Haru-Ware drank to give himself courage in battle, and all of them ate things people never thought of serving them, for they were beyond human consumption, such as precious stones. They consumed a daily portion of Ma'at, the spirit of order in the cosmos. Indeed, Ma'at was their essential food, and sometimes they drank their own tears and sweat. But no gods enjoyed eating flesh. If they indulged in meat at all, it was in moderation, without salt, and always roasted, with much grain on the side. So this page is basically telling us that the Egyptian gods, they do not eat a lot. They like bread and water, basically. They don't really, some of them drink, but not really a lot of them drink either. They just like the basics, bread, water, and they take in ma'at, which is order. Kind of like a vitamin. Think of ma'at like a vitamin. You take it because it's good for you. Okay? In truth, some of them had a great distaste for certain meats. Ra, for example, would never eat turtle meat, since he considered turtles powers of evil and thus his enemies. And many considered eating meat crude and brutal. Okay, so they really didn't eat meat. However, except for the god Sobek. All right, get ready to underline information about Sobek. Sobek was a crocodile, and crocodiles love meat, preferably raw. He couldn't help himself. It was built into him just as much as was the fact that he had a tail and a huge jaw and feet with claws. It was there from the start. All right, so Sobek, get ready to underline. Sobek is a crocodile that loves raw meat. He has a huge tail, a huge jaw, and feet and claws. Press pause to write down your answer in 1A. And if you are looking for a quote, you can use a sentence from this middle paragraph. Press pause to write down your quote and play when you're ready to keep going. The start was in the original waters. Well, of course, he was a crocodile after all. The goddess Nit, who was an extension of the watery chaos Nun, gave birth to 2 aquatic sons, the serpentine demon Apep, who descended immediately into the underworld Duat to plague Ra each night as he made his trip across the lake toward dawn, and the crocodile Sobek. All right, so we know that in our setting, the story takes place in the original waters of Nun, and Nit, who's like Nun's sister, Nit gave birth to Apep and Sobek. So now we know that Apep is Sobek's brother. Press pause to write down your answer for the setting. And you can choose a quote from this last paragraph for your setting. All right, and now we're listening for the problem. Unlike his brother Apep, however, Sobek didn't leave his mother at birth. Instead, he clung to her as a child is wont to do. And she cradled him as a mother should. She loved him true, and he loved her. And so Sobek's nature was a balance between nearly 2 contradictory things: the insatiable need to devour flesh and the understanding of how love binds one to another. So the author is telling us that Sobek is unusual because he eats meat. None of the other gods really eat meat, but Sobek loves it. So that makes him really different, but he also knows how to love people. He knows how to love other gods, and that is a good quality about him. Let's keep going. Early in his life, he won the confidence of the gods for an act of random kindness. The god Haru Ware had swum through the waters of Nun, and a blue water lily thus arose, which bloomed and gave forth 4 sons: Hapi, Duaf, Mutef, Amset, and Quebsinuf. The 4 juvenile gods were helpless and in the middle of the deep water. Sobek circled them. He couldn't help noticing their pudgy little arms and legs and their tender bellies, their fresh blood. His mouth must have watered at the thought of their juicy organs. His nostrils must have flared, yet he kept that powerful jaw shut and offered his back, transporting the boys to the safety of land. They were babes after all, and he had been a babe, a cuddled one, the date his mother loved to smell, the pomegranate she held against her cheek. Who knows, perhaps it was in honor of Sobek that these 4 gods eventually assumed the job of guards of containers that held the organs and entrails of the dead. Okay, so there was a problem. It's that, Haru Ware's 4 children were born in the middle of the ocean, and Sobek wanted to eat them, but he did not. Instead, he transported them to safety. Let's keep going. At other times, though, Sobek's love for flesh made a fool of him. In the ancient world, there were many scuffles among the gods of various nations. During one of those periods, Sobek came upon a band of enemies in his wanderings. As he saw it, the situation was perfect. He could eat to his heart's content and vanquish Egypt's foes at the same time. He devoured all of them, down to their bones and the very last drops of blood, but he saved their heads so he could show them to the other Egyptian gods and goddesses and bask in their praise. When Sobek returned home, the deities saw him coming. took one look at the bloody booty, and shouted in disgust, "No, don't let him eat those heads! Give him bread! Give him bread!" Poor Sobek was chagrined. So Sobek ate some people. He ate some of the Egyptian gods' enemies, and he brought their heads back to show the gods, so that as proof that, look at all the people I killed. But the gods thought that he was going to eat the people's heads, and they were like, gross. All right, press pause to write down Sobek's problem. And if you are looking for a quote, you can use one of the last sentences on this page. All right, and so we're going to think about, how does Sobek overcome this problem he has of craving meat? All right, that time Sobek went without punishment for his beastly behavior, but another time he was not so lucky. When the god Set slew his brother Usir and ripped him into 14 pieces, he scattered those pieces across lands and waters. Sobek, great god of the marsh as he was, naturally came across a piece. He eyed it floating there. Clearly Usir was dead, so one little piece was no further use to him. Who would care? The morsel tantalized him, so he ate it. Snip, snap, gone. Aset gathered the 13 pieces of Usir, but she couldn't find the last one. Oh my God, that's where it went. A serpent told Aset that a monster had eaten that part. But Sobek was no monster. He was just a crocodile, a hungry carnivore that was well-intentioned. What maliciousness could there be in eating a single bite of an already dead god? The act was a result of voraciousness, not meanness. But the gods and goddesses didn't see it Sobek's way. Okay, so another problem that Sobek had, and you can write it down here in this space if you need to, was that he ate the 14th piece of Usir, and Aset could not put him back together. She got mad at him because he ate the last piece of Usir. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. It's in this paragraph up here, or this one right here. Press pause to write down your quote and turn the page and make sure you're at the top of the last page for the solution. They punished him, that's the other gods, punished him by cutting out his tongue. Even today, crocodiles' tongues are stunted so that few see them unless a crocodile opens his jaws especially wide. All right, so Sobek, he ended up being punished, and the gods and goddesses cut out his tongue so that he had a hard time tasting meat. Press pause to write down the solution, and the quote you can write down is this first sentence at the top of the page. All right, and you can finish reading this. It basically talks about how Sobek helped Harusa fight Set, and the fishermen of the Nile, they also worship Set. They also worship Sobek. And so the last part says, all in all, he was feared, meat eater as he was. All in all, he was loved, beneficent God that he was. And so when you're thinking about what his role is among the gods, you could talk about how Sobek, he helps the Egyptian gods and goddesses, fight various nations. He also helped the gods when they were fighting each other, and he helps the fishermen of the Nile.